Every thief has a story, but not every story ends in darkness. Some begin with hunger and end with hope. It all started with a stolen sandwich, a meager meal of just 2 slices of bread and a little butter. But for Samuel, it was more than just a sandwich, it was a means of survival. He didn't have lunch that day and the day before. The truth is that most days, he didn't have anything to eat at all. His uniform was always shabby and his sandals were worn out. And while the other kids talked about cartoons and weekend trips, Samuel was busy figuring out how to make hunger feel less painful. At Oliver Street Public School, everyone knew Samuel, not because he was popular, not because he was smart, but because he was different. He was quiet and always alone. And always shabby. He sat in the last row of the classroom, head down, trying to avoid everyone. But still the kids noticed him. Chuka, the loud one, always had a joke, most of them at Samuel's expense. Toby, the class clown, once called him Ghost Boy because he barely spoke. And Aisha, the kind one, would sometimes slide a biscuit across the desk when no one was looking. Samuel didn't ask for much, just to be left alone. But one day, he couldn't take the hunger anymore. It was a Tuesday. The bell rang for break, while the class rushed outside to eat and play, but Samuel stayed behind as always because he neither had food to eat nor friends to play with. He was all alone in the classroom when he spotted a lunchbox left on Chuka's desk. His stomach growled with hunger. His heart raced as he looked around to see if anyone was watching. His hands trembled as he opened the lid he had never stolen before. He grabbed the sandwich and began to eat it hungrily before anyone caught him. But nothing stays hidden in a classroom for long. As his luck would have it, the classroom door flung open suddenly and Chuka and his friends walked in. With the bread still choked on his mouth, he turned to face them, wishing that the ground would swallow him alive. "You thief, how dare you touch my food?" Chuka snarled at him. Samuel remained speechless, too ashamed to talk. "Answer me," Chuka shouted at him, while his other classmates watched him spitefully. Enough, a voice came from behind the door. Miss Ada, their class teacher, stepped into the classroom. Miss Ada was one of those rare teachers who saw more than grades. She saw stories behind every student's eyes. She looked at Samuel. He didn't cry. He didn't deny it, he just lowered his head. "Come with me," she said gently. As they both walked down the hallway to her office, Samuel was trembling, expecting to be punished, beaten with cane or was still suspended or expelled from school what he had done. But Miss Ada didn't shout at him or grab a cane to flog him. Instead, she turned to him and asked gently, "Samuel, why did you steal that food? Are you hungry?" He nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. That was the moment everything changed. Miss Ada didn't punish him. She didn't call him a thief. Instead, she opened her drawer, pulled out another sandwich, and handed it to him. Then she said, "You're not a bad child. You're just in a hard place. But hard places don't last forever." Samuel didn't know it then, but that moment, that kindness, would change the course of his life forever. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person to believe in you, even when you don't believe in yourself. After that day in Miss Ada's office, something in Samuel shifted. No, the hunger didn't magically disappear. His situation at home was still tough. His widowed mother worked long hours cleaning houses, and some nights, they shared a bowl of soaked curry and slept early to forget the ache in their stomachs. But now, Samuel felt sick. Every morning, Miss Ada would slide an extra bread roll into his bag or leave a warm cup of tea on his desk. She never made a big deal out of it. She never embarrassed him. She just helped, quietly. And that quiet kindness began to bloom in him like sunlight through a crack in the wall. He started answering questions in class. He stopped hiding in the last row. He even began smiling a little more, especially when Aisha waved at him. The other students noticed the change. Even Chuka, though still loud, seemed to back off a bit. And over time, the teasing stopped. Samuel wasn't just surviving anymore. He was beginning to grow. Miss Ada didn't know it, but she had lit a fire in that boy. A fire to rise above his circumstances. to prove that he was more than the empty lunchbox he carried. To become someone who could one day make others feel the way she made him feel, seen, heard, and worth something. And so, Samuel started dreaming. He dreamed of becoming a teacher, or maybe a doctor. Or maybe someone who built something the world actually needed. He didn't have all the answers, but he had a reason to keep going. Because someone believed in him. And that was the beginning of everything. Samuel became a quiet force. He wasn't the loudest in class, or the one with the fanciest backpack, but he was always present, listening, learning and growing. Miss Ada took notice. So she began giving him extra assignments. Not as punishment, but as fuel. Read this book, Samuel. It'll stretch your mind, she'd say with a wink. Or, help me mark these papers. Let's see how sharp your eye is. And he did. He read everything she gave him, borrowed old textbooks, stayed after school to ask questions, and even tutored his classmates in math and English. But life didn't get easier just because he was trying harder. There were still nights when the power went out, and he'd study by candlelight. There were days he walked to school barefoot because his only sandals broke. And there were moments, hard, painful ones, when the weight of poverty almost made him quit. But every time he felt like giving up, he remembered Miss Ada's words. Hard places don't last forever. And so, he kept moving. In secondary school, Samuel earned a scholarship. He couldn't believe it. Someone had actually paid his way, books, fees, uniform, everything. He didn't know the sponsor's name, but in his heart, he felt it was a ripple from Miss Ada's kindness. He studied harder than ever, waking up at dawn to revise, staying late in the library, even skipping school parties so he could save up for data to study online. And all the while, he kept a little notebook where he wrote ideas. Ideas about changing the way children learn. About giving poor kids access to free lessons. About creating something bigger than himself. By the time he got into university, Samuel already had a rough sketch of the app that would later change everything. He called it Uplift. A free learning app for students in underserved schools, offering videos, quizzes, past exam questions, and mentorship tips. It wasn't perfect. He had no coding skills, no team, no money. But he had a vision. And that was enough to start. With the help of free online tutorials, midnight coffees, and sheer stubbornness, Samuel taught himself to code. He pitched the app idea at a university competition. He was nervous, shaking and wearing his only decent shirt. But when he spoke, the room went quiet. People listened. Because his voice carried something no software ever could, authenticity. He wasn't building an app for profit. He was building the app he wished someone had built for him. And that was when the doors began to open. Years passed. Samuel wasn't that skinny boy anymore. He was now a confident young man, taller, broader, with quiet strength in his eyes and wisdom that came from years of struggle. His app, Uplift, had taken off. Students from across Nigeria, and even beyond, were using it to learn. It had won awards, attracted funding, and opened doors Samuel once thought were locked forever. But even as the applause grew louder, Samuel's heart remained grounded. There was one person he needed to see. One person who never asked for recognition, but gave him everything he needed when he had nothing at all. Miss Ada. So one morning, he flew back to his hometown. The roads were just as dusty. The old stores still sold roasted corn and mangoes. But as Samuel stepped through the gates of Olowo Street Public School, he felt something different. He wasn't that hungry boy anymore. He walked past the old block of classrooms, now crumbling at the edges, and saw children playing under the same tree where he used to sit alone. Then, he saw her, Miss Ada. Sitting on a wooden bench, glasses slipping down her nose, grading papers just like she used to. Could she recognize him? He took a slow step forward. Miss Ada. She looked up. There was a pause. A blink. And then, Samuel. Her voice cracked as he looked at the well-dressed man standing in front of her. Then she laughed, a soft, teary laugh, and said, "You came back." He told her everything, his struggles, his dreams, the app, the awards. But most importantly, he told her why he came. I came back to say thank you, he said, emotion filling his voice. And to show you something. He led her down a small path, past the old classrooms, to a large, beautiful building painted bright blue and white, with new windows, new chairs, and books stacked high on plain shelves. At the entrance was a sign. The Ada Learning Center, powered by Uplift. It's for the children, he said, smiling. Just like you were there for me. Now I can be there for them. The building had free internet, laptops, and a solar-powered generator. Teachers were being trained to use the app. Students got after-school lessons and meals. Miss Ada's eyes filled with tears. I was just trying to help a hungry boy, she whispered. And that hungry boy, Samuel said, holding her hand, grew up to feed a generation. That day, the entire school held a surprise event to honor Miss Ada. Former students showed up, some with children of their own. The community came out to celebrate the woman who had changed so many lives, without ever asking for anything in return. Samuel stood on stage, holding a microphone with slightly trembling hands, and said, "She gave me hope when all I had was hunger. She reminded me I was still human, even when life tried to strip me of that dignity. And now, I dedicate this center to her, so her kindness keeps changing lives long after today." The crowd clapped. Miss Ada cried tears of joy. And Samuel, he finally felt whole. Not because of money. Not because of success. But because he had come full circle, from needing kindness, to giving it back in abundance. The sun began to set over Oliver Street Public School. Children laughed in the background, chasing each other across the compound. The Ada Learning Center stood tall behind them, glowing softly in the golden light. Samuel sat once more under the mango tree, beside Miss Ada, only this time, he wasn't the student. He was a giver, a builder, and a man with purpose. "Do you ever wonder," Miss Ada asked quietly, "what would have happened if I hadn't shown you kindness that day?" Samuel smiled. "I think about it all the time," he said. "That one act changed everything. Sometimes, it's not about grand gestures. Sometimes, the most powerful seeds are planted in silence, in simplicity, in a sandwich quietly shared, in a word of belief spoken to a child on the edge." Samuel would go on to build more centers like that one. Across villages, towns, and states. He mentored other kids like himself. Helped families. Created scholarships and changed lives. But no matter how far he went, he never forgot that it all started, not with an app or a plan, but with kindness. And so, if you take anything from Samuel's story, let it be this. You never know how far one act of compassion can go. You never know what a hungry child might become. You never know how your kindness today might build a legacy tomorrow. Be the person who gives when it's inconvenient. Be the hand that lifts. The voice that encourages. The light in someone's darkness. Because in a world that often feels cold, compassion is still the most powerful tool we have. And kindness. Kindness always comes back, multiplied. If this story touched your heart, don't let it stop here. Like this video, drop a comment below and tell us, what act of kindness changed your life? Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that hope still exists. And most importantly, subscribe to Luminous Thoughts for more inspiring stories that warm the soul and awaken the spirit. Together, we can inspire minds through story and truth.